All right, we are going to talk about density. All right, so what is density? Well, density basically measures how compact a substance is. So I think the easiest way to think about this is with a couple examples. So for example, iron, a metal, is denser than wood, which is denser than, let's say, cardboard. Which is denser than air. And kind of the way we measure density is we'd think to ourselves, if we wanted to make sure this was true, we'd take maybe a cubic inch of iron and we'd weigh it. And we compare that to how much does a cubic inch of wood weigh. And the iron, if we had a cubic inch of iron, it would be heavier than the wood. So we would say iron would be heavier than that. And obviously a cubic inch of wood would weigh more than a cubic inch of cardboard, which would weigh more than a cubic inch of air. One type of density that we often talk about is population density. So how dense are different cities or different states or different areas or different countries. So we'll do a quick example using population density, and we'll talk about 3 American cities. So the first city is Los Angeles, which has 4 million people, and it has 503 square miles. So that's how big this city is in square miles. Next, we'll do San Francisco, which has a much smaller population. It has that many people, 884,363 people. And the square miles, it's only 46.87 miles. Really, San Francisco is basically a square. It's on a peninsula. It's the end of a peninsula that is 7 miles, approximately 7 miles on one side and 7 miles on the other. So it's a tiny city. And then finally, let's do our own city, which is Chicago. And Chicago has 2.716 million people. And it has 234 cubic miles. And so what we're going to try to do is we're going to figure out which city is the most dense out of these 3. And what we're really asking when we're saying that is what we're going to do is we're going to see how many people live in 1 square mile. So here we have 4 million people, but it's a pretty big city. Los Angeles is one of the bigger cities. It has 500 square miles. Whereas San Francisco has a much smaller population, but it also is a much smaller city. So to really compare them to each other, what we're going to do is we're going to figure out, well, in each different city, how many people live in exactly 1 square mile. So if we distributed all the people so they were all equally distanced from each other across the entire city, and then we drew a square mile, how many people would be there? Okay, so how do we do this? It's really fairly simple. So let's do it for Los Angeles first. So for LA, what we're going to do is we're going to take, the density will be equal to, you just take 4 million people and you divide it by, and by the way, I've been writing down the wrong thing here. This should be squared. It's not cubic. I think I've been saying square, but it's supposed to be square miles divided by 503 square miles. And then all you have to do, once you set up this fraction, is we want to know how many it is per 1 mile. And so all you really have to do is divide this. Now for 4 million, maybe let's change that to an actual number to make our life a little easier. So that would be 6 zeros. And so I'm going to do 4, turn on my calculator, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, divided by 503, and we get, this is equal to 7,952, and we'll round to the nearest person. Okay, now the units actually end up being people per mile squared. And the way we think about this, this is 7,952 people per square mile. So if you took 1 square mile, and if everyone was exactly equidistant from each other, there would be about 7,952 people for every square mile in LA. All right, let's do the same thing for San Francisco. So San Francisco will be 884,363 divided by, is people, divided by 46.87 miles squared. And so I'm going to put it in my calculator. I don't think you need to see me do that. You just divide the top divided by the bottom, and you actually get 18,868 people per square mile. All right, and let's do the last one, our own city of Chicago. And the density is so 2.716 million. That means we're going to basically, that will become this number. And when we divide by this, let's see what we get. And if we round it, it's about 11,607 people per square mile. All right, so this gives us an idea of like kind of how full a city is. How full does it feel? Are people living far away from each other? Or are people kind of living on top of each other? Now in LA, it's such a lot, even though there are more people, it's so spread out. It is twice the amount of, it's more than twice as big physically, but it doesn't have more than twice as many people. So it kind of makes sense. There's actually more people per square mile in Chicago than there is in LA. And if you ever went to LA, you would perhaps kind of notice it's a lot of single family homes. It's not a lot of, it feels like the suburbs to a certain extent if you go there. It's not as dense. There's not a lot of 3 flats and 2 flats and bigger buildings. And San Francisco, as it turns out, even though it has not even 1 million people, since it is in such a small space, it is actually even more dense than Chicago. So even though it's a smaller city, in a way, if you go there, it feels like there's a ton of people because there are more people per square mile. So it feels like a big city, even though really it's much smaller than some of the cities you know. And if you wanted, you could figure out, well, how much bigger is one than the other? How much more dense is, let's do the smallest, which would be LA. How much denser, how many times more dense is, let's say, San Francisco than LA? If we wanted to answer this question, it's very simple. All you have to do is a quick division of, so we'll do 18,868 divided by, and LA's density was 7,952. So let's do that in our calculator. And it's about 2.3 times, or I should, when you round it, it actually becomes about 2.4. So it's almost 2.5 times as dense. So there's almost 2.5 times as many people in each square mile of San Francisco than there is in Los Angeles.